Lisa Dahl, health and well-being coach. Welcome to Getting Healthy Without Rules. This show is about understanding the things that impact your wellness and finding ways to improve it. In this show, we take a non-diet, no-rule approach to health and wellness. Health and wellness is a moving target. We all have different needs and opportunities to improve it. This approach allows you to make the best choice with the information that you have right now. It helps you to be present, flexible, and resilient. In addition, I support you in moving from judgment to curiosity and offering yourself self-compassion. It is time that we are all a little bit kinder to ourselves. Today's episode is about weight loss drugs, specifically GLP-1 inhibitors, also known as Ozempic and Wegovy. Before we begin to unpack this lightning rod topic, please note that we will use the words fat or larger bodied. For example, you can be in a fat body and accept your body. We use these words as simple descriptors without judgment. Fat is simply another adjective like thin, and it is up to us to remove the stigma and the negative connotation that society and diet culture has created. Weight loss drugs are on an emotionally charged topic for many people. It is intimate and controversial, and can instill both feelings of hope and disappointment. As professionals who work with clients, we are well aware of the extreme pressure, stigma, and shame that people in larger bodies can experience as a result of culture and societal pressures around body size. These pressures can have a profound impact on a person's mental and physical health and can lead to feelings of isolation, anxiety, and even depression. I share my guests' sentiment that we must acknowledge the fact that some people feel that they need to lose weight to feel safe in their bodies. If that is you and you are listening, please know that we hear you and understand how powerful these feelings can be. Today, we aim to provide education and clarity about the messaging and information surrounding weight loss drugs that are circulating on social media and in the news. Today, we're going to explore the increased use and popularity of GLP-1 inhibitors for weight loss through an anti-diet, weight-inclusive lens. Who is using weight loss medications and who is prescribing them? How these diet drugs affect the body? What research tells us about their long-term use? And how these drugs can impact our relationship with food and body. Be sure to stay until the end for this week's Healthy Practice. I'm excited to introduce today's expert guest, Heidi Karner. Heidi is a registered dietitian with a master's in health promotion and a certificate of health psychology from the University of Connecticut. Heidi practices through an anti-diet, size-inclusive lens. She is passionate about supporting her clients in nourishing their bodies without sacrificing their mental well-being and enjoyment of food through a passionate eating framework rooted in self-care and intuitive eating. Her client work centers around body respect and making peace with food. Heidi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
We are so excited to have this conversation. There's so much information going around and lots of people have thoughts and opinions. Yeah. So first, for those who may be unaware of GLP-1 inhibitors, what are they and what do they do to the body that affects body weight?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this specific drug class, known as GLP-1 inhibitors, it encompasses a lot of different medications. So, one of the first ones that ever even hit the market was called Trulicity. We don't hear about that one quite as often, but it falls within that same category. There's also things called Mounjaro and some of these other medications that kind of all fit within this drug class called GLP-1 inhibitors. Today we're focusing on semaglutide, which is a very specific type of a GLP-1 inhibitor, but they all kind of work very similarly. So essentially, a semaglutide acts as something called an incretin. So we have these hormones in the body, they're called incretins, and their job is to kind of regulate and manage not only just hunger and fullness, but all different kinds of things in the body like blood sugar, moods, digestion, so on and so forth. But the specific incretins that semaglutide mimics is one called GLP-1. And normally when we eat food of any kind, it's this from the small intestine, the GLP-1 is secreted into the bloodstream. And that signals the beta cells, which is a specific type of cell in the pancreas, to produce something called insulin. So insulin is the hormone involved in taking our blood sugar from high to a normal range. So it's very normal when we eat something, especially something with carbs, that our blood sugar is going to go up, right? And so the pancreas senses that and brings blood glucose levels back down to normal. So these drugs are originally designed for people with diabetes. This is why there's so much talk around blood sugars, insulin, incretins, because that was why GLP-1s were created. They were created to help individuals navigating diabetes, insulin resistance, PCOS. And so really the benefit of these drugs, especially for people with type 2, would be that, that this drug mimics an already existing hormone in the body, these incretins. So basically what's happening is this GLP-1 drug, in addition to the GLP that's already in your body, is basically telling your pancreas, make more insulin. So for people with higher blood sugars, this is a great solution, right? Now we have lower blood sugars, better quality of life, and better health outcomes. Why are we using these things for weight, right? So it was actually back in 2005 that these medications were first started to be prescribed. And it wasn't actually until about 2017, so very, very recent, that these medications were actually started to be prescribed and used specifically for intentional weight loss. There's a lot of ways that makes that happen, though. It's a lot of different ways.
So how does that happen?
So, and it's so interesting because it's so individualized. These drugs affect everyone's body in a very different way. But the three main kind of mechanisms of action of this drug would be on the brain, on the stomach, and also on the pancreas, right? So we talked about the pancreatic function and how that medication helps your pancreas produce more insulin. But this medication also acts directly on the brain. So it acts on a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. And there's specific neurons that are designed to regulate things like hunger and fullness in that part of the brain. So a GLP-1 inhibitor is going to impact that. And it's going to make us feel full, or what we call satiety. So it's going to increase the satiety neurons in that part of the brain and make us feel fuller for a longer period of time. So it's really changing your brain chemistry pretty drastically. The other thing it'll do too is it acts on specifically digestion in the stomach. So it does something called delaying gastric emptying, which is essentially what it sounds like. It's keeping food or keeping stomach contents in the stomach for a longer period of time. This is a diagnosis in and of itself. It's something called gastroparesis, right? So a lot of people live with this specific type of disorder in their digestive system that can create a lot of discomfort, bloating, gas, sometimes vomiting, nausea. So these are pretty common symptoms that come along with these kinds of medications.
So it's creating a symptom that somebody wants to cure.
Yeah.
And now we're bringing that in.
And creating
that. And then you need to have medication to help
Correct.
that.
Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, you told me it was first approved in
2005.
2005.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And have they been used for weight loss since that time or only since 2017?
Yeah. Yep. So it was actually just a byproduct. That's not why these drugs were created. So, it just happened to be that we were researching and getting more information about how these drugs were serving this diabetes population. And then they just started to pick up on something. And they thought, interesting. People are losing between anywhere from 5 to 20% of their total body weight on these medications. We can capitalize on this. So the main pharmaceutical company that did that is a company called Novo Nordisk. They are the ones who created Ozempic. They're also the ones back in 2017 who then repackaged Ozempic as something that we now call Wegovy, right? So the way to get around the insurance and the prescriptions and all of the red tape that were there with Ozempic, right? Because remember, it was approved for people with diabetes, with type 2 diabetes. And as we mentioned, all the popularity and social media, and there was just this flocking of individuals to their primary care providers saying, I want this medication, independent of whether or not they had diabetes. And so this started becoming prescribed off-label. And that's where Wegovy was born, because practitioners were saying, well, I can't figure out how to get this drug covered for my patient. They don't have diabetes. And so they thought, well, we could repackage it and make some money and call it Wegovy. So it's the same drug. It's just one is typically prescribed or is FDA approved to be prescribed to folks with diabetes. One is just, prescribed to folks with quote unquote obesity.
How widely are they being used today?
Oh my gosh.
It's a hot topic.
It's so hot. And I can't tell you, I mean, just within the last year, I mean, granted, this started in 2017, but I think with everything that happened with the pandemic, and there's been so much health anxiety and, individuals, there's a lot of just pressure, especially, I don't know if you heard about this, but I had a lot of clients coming in talking to me about, the COVID-15, and I've gained
it's
the
like
COVID-15.
The freshman 15.
Yeah. And so there's just so much fear and anxiety, and people are going back to their doctors for the first time in, a couple of years. And a lot of primary care physicians, as well as endocrinologists, are prescribing these medications. It's really seen as kind of the Band-Aid. The Band-Aid, yeah, exactly.
I'm curious, are there screening tests for eating disordered or disordered eating patterns before the medication is being prescribed?
Nope, not at all. I haven't seen none of that whatsoever. And what I will say, though, is that, we at Happy Valley work with some phenomenal Health at Every Size aligned practitioners who identify in patients who come to them and say, I really need these medications. I've had clients who've come to me saying, well, my doctor recommended maybe that I talk with you first. So that's been kind of a cool discussion, to be able to say, I think that's a great idea that we have this open discussion first with a dietitian or a helping professional before deciding to take these kinds of medications. It's a huge decision, and there's a lot of risks that go along with it.
It's easy to prescribe because you write the prescription.
Yeah.
And the after is not in somebody's space
No.
on a daily basis.
Absolutely not, no.
So tell me, we talked about how it impacts 3 different parts of our body. Specifically, what are the side effects and risks associated with these drugs?
Very good question. So I'll start with the side effects. So I started my career as a diabetes educator, and I was using Trulicity a lot more before this Ozempic boom ever happened. So, I'm very familiar with the side effects associated with the GLP-1. There was a study done in 2022 that found that about a quarter of individuals who start taking these medications, between 20 and 25%, will experience some fairly severe nausea and vomiting as a result of taking these medications.
Is that consistent, or is it until you get used to it?
That's a good question. It's so interesting because I hear physicians and providers talking about this, like getting used to it
Is
kind
there such
of
a thing?
Yes, but no, because I would say the clients that I have right now, specifically, my clients with diabetes who've been on this medication since, probably at least 3 or 4 years at this point, you learn to live with it. You start to kind of, I can kind of deal with the nausea. I think I can, and then these are important discussions to have, because a lot of the times the questions I'll ask are like, really? Is it worth it? Is it serving you in the way that you'd hoped? Is it, and I think when it comes to blood sugars, yeah, absolutely. If you're someone with an A1C of, 9 or 10, you start in this medication, it brings you down to 7. And let's say the side effects are somewhat tolerable, right? Because I've never seen them completely go away. I've seen them dissipate, or I've seen them kind of be intermittent, or for some individuals, they're just not that severe to begin with. But I don't know that this narrative that you start with these symptoms and then they just go away. I haven't seen that, in my work with folks.
So, it's 2 different conversations. So somebody who needs to have their blood sugar managed, it's super valuable.
Totally.
And it is about improving their quality of life.
And longevity, absolutely.
Then you have somebody who is healthy, as opposed to the stigma of the weight saying that they are unhealthy.
Unhealthy, yeah.
And are they willing to tolerate feeling unwell to be in a smaller size?
To be in a smaller body, yeah. That's the root of a lot of my discussions with folks, of why are we willing to endure these side effects? Look at the world that we live in.
So I'm curious, what are the whys that you're hearing?
I want to be thin. I want, it's let's get at the root. What is so important to you? I want my clothes to fit. I want my body image to be better. I don't want to be so upset about the way that I look all the time. So what I'm hearing is that this is a body image issue for a lot of people, right? Not everyone.
Right.
And I want to make it clear too, because we live in a very ableist, fat-phobic society. So there's also pieces of this that have a lot to do with mobility. And there's a lot, when you're living in a larger body and navigating the world in a larger body for many years, you experience this allostatic load, or this weight of expectations from your healthcare providers, your friends, your families. So when an injection comes around that says, well, I think I can improve the quality of your life, of course we're going to want to explore that. And I think it's so important not to riddle this with guilt or shame, because
you don't want
it's
to be dismissive.
Right, because this is so important that individuals feel like they can explore this. Right. And I think as a provider, it's not my responsibility to be on this side of body acceptance, body trust, intuitive eating. It's my responsibility to say, what do you want to do? Well, this seems like it's really important to you. Why? What do you think is impacting why this is so important to you? Can we just take a step back? Is there as much urgency in making this decision as maybe we feel like there is, or as our doctor's telling us that there is? So I really feel like, clients who meet with me, they know what I do, and they know the work that I do and the philosophies that I support. But I don't, I don't feel like that it's my role to say, you should do this or you shouldn't do this, right? Because this is such an individual and really, really challenging decision to make.
Right. I mean, our job is to help the client or patient to identify what is best for them.
Yeah. And that might be taking one of these medications, right? Or it might not be. But I think having a space to explore that and feel safe in doing so.
And not right or wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not the prescriber of saying this is what you have to do.
Correct, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What does the data show to have to support the long-term use of these drugs?
Yeah. We don't have it. It doesn't exist. So, I mentioned it first started really being used in this off-label way in 2017. So we're talking, what, 6 years,
right.
5 or 6 years? So in terms of longitudinal data, it doesn't exist.
What is time frame when somebody says, I do have data?
Yeah.
What is that time frame?
I would say, and you could define that. I mean, something like, for example, metformin, which is a really, really common, well-known diabetes medication. It's been around for over 50 years. I mean, we have decades and decades worth of longitudinal data actually in Europe before it was ever even FDA approved for use in the United States. So, I mean, that's like the gold standard. When I think about longitudinal data, I mean, we've got, thousands of studies on the safety and the efficacy of something like metformin. So compared to something like that, we have nothing. And there are studies being done, they are coming out.
It's going to take time.
But it's going to take time. And the preliminary studies are showing just some of the short term, right? So studies are showing side effects. Studies are showing especially how long it takes after you discontinue this medication.
That's one of my that's one of my questions.
Yeah.
So tell me, what happens when you stop the medication?
Yeah. So all of the mechanism of action that was happening through that drug, so the impact on the hypothalamus, the impact on the digestive system, the impact on the endocrine system, stops.
Is it instantaneous?
Instantaneous.
And the injections are weekly, is that correct?
Once weekly, yep.
And if you miss a day, miss 2 days, if you're off by a week, you go on vacation, what does that look like?
It's hard to tell. I mean, specifically in terms of weight, it's hard to measure. In terms of blood sugars, you'll see a difference. And it kind of varies, right? So I have some clients who may accidentally, run out of their script or accidentally skip a week. They'll see it in their blood sugars. I had a client actually just a couple weeks ago. We were chatting. She said, I don't know what's going on with my blood sugars. And we're sitting there kind of brainstorming, thinking. I said, you took your Trulicity this week, right? And she's like, So, I mean, yeah, you can
happens.
see, yes, you can see the changes in blood glucose levels pretty quickly. In terms of weight, we don't have anything that short term to suggest that something like a week or 2 weeks could have an impact on weight. But we do know that after a year of discontinuing the medication, individuals who did lose weight on the medication, which I want to mention real quick, you can start on this med and not lose a single pound. I think it's really important that people understand that too, because this craze of like, you will lose weight, this drug is going to, it's like, no. I've had several clients who've started on something like this, specifically for their blood sugars, and didn't have a change in their weight. So just, throwing that out there, and that's important to consider as well too.
How long does it take once you stop the medication for the side effects to subside?
Very quickly. Very quickly. So usually I found in working with clients, within a week or so, they're like, oh, I'm not nauseous anymore. Or like, I like food again. I mean, because that's really what's happening. That the hypothalamus is it's part of this really complex cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones when we feel hungry. So, you think about hunger, and a lot of times we just think of it like a growling stomach or feeling in our gut.
We know it's more than that.
There's such a huge mental component. And the one thing that I've noticed over and over time again that I hear from folks taking these meds are like, I just don't really care about food anymore. I'm just kind of meh,
And are these patients getting enough nourishment?
Most of the time, no, especially not at the beginning. I find myself talking a lot about supplement shakes, Ensure, Boost, Glucerna, just to get in nourishment and calories. Because especially at the beginning, when these side effects are pretty severe, I mean, I'll have clients coming in saying, not only do I not feel hungry, I don't even think about food at all during the day. None. And when we talk about something like intuitive eating, we're talking about body cues, interoceptive awareness, realigning hunger cues, tapping in and feeling how your body's communicating something like hunger to you.
So it supports the disconnect between the mind-body connection,
100%.
which is the heart of the practice of intuitive eating. Yeah. I'm curious, and I believe this to be true, that if you're having a surgical procedure, that you need to stop the medication
Agreed. Yes.
before a couple of weeks beforehand.
Absolutely, yeah.
And tell me why.
At least as far as we know right now, it can impact surgical outcomes. Also, when we think about nourishment, right? That's so important. There's actually even more data that's coming out now that's showing, for a lot of surgeries, they'll talk about, fasting or NPO, nothing by mouth for a certain amount of time. And more studies are coming out showing actually outcomes of a lot of procedures are actually improved if we let the patient eat pretty close up until the beginning of the procedure. So it depends on the procedure, but when you're talking about these kinds of medications that are impacting someone's ability to eat and nourish themselves properly, I would imagine that has a big impact on surgical outcomes too.
So the positive is that people start to eat again. What happens to their mental health? Because now they're worrying about gaining, if they were one of the people that lost weight, do they now go into the worry of gaining weight in that 2-week time
100%.
period? And what's their mental health in that experience?
Yeah, not good. I sit with, and I call it sitting in the suck. Yeah. So I sit in the suck with a lot of my clients, especially since we're running out of these drugs, right?
There's not availability.
There's not availability. There's so much scarcity. And so I even have clients, I have clients who have diabetes and clients who don't have diabetes who are not able to get this drug right now. They have the script. It's a standing script at the pharmacy. They go to the pharmacy and they say, we don't have that. We're not going to get that in for 2 or 3 weeks or a month. So a specific client comes to mind. I remember she came into session just with so much devastation and grief, right? Of this was fixing it. I wasn't binging anymore. This fixed my problem, and now it's gone, and I don't have access to it anymore. And there's so much grief.
And she doesn't have the tools to be able to manage it because here was the quick fix.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it goes round and round and round.
And, and that's the other thing too, is like I notice, especially when we get into these patterns of just not eating throughout the day regularly, consistently. I find that so much of my work with folks is just are we eating? Are you eating? Are you eating throughout the day? Are you eating multiple times throughout the day? So when that kind of is gone or lost, let's say we decide to discontinue this drug. Well, part of behavior is, yes, the interoceptive cues, but part of it is also just habit building, right? So I find that a lot of individuals feel so lost when they get off these drugs. They're like, wait, I'm hungry now.
Now what do I do?
Now what do I do? And I find that I have a lot of clients coming in, meeting with me after getting off these drugs and saying, I think I need help. I don't think this was serving me in the way that I thought it would originally.
So they have to go back into learning how to connect with their body, learn how to accept and understand their relationship, their cues, and to be able to take different actions. And it's scary.
Yeah, it feels like starting over again. I've heard a client say that. It just kind of feels like a brand new body. And I think as we talk about this idea of body acceptance, body respect, or just more body compassion in general, especially when folks are experiencing severe symptoms, that's one of the exploratory questions I'll ask. Like, why is it that you feel that it is so important that you put your body into this kind of state of distress? And that, what are some of the social narratives and what are some of the indoctrinated narratives that have got us to this point where you're willing to endure really severe symptoms, but because...
Right. I like to ask, who helped pack your bags?
Yeah.
You didn't just come to today on your own thoughts. This information has been fed to you and you formulated your thoughts, but it's not that you just popped out.
It's not your idea.
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are some of the most common misconceptions about the GLP inhibitors and their effectiveness on weight management?
Yeah. The biggest one is that it doesn't have anything to do with food. That this idea that, well, if you take these drugs, you can eat whatever you want and still lose weight. Sure, but you're not going to want to eat. You're not going to think about food or be enticed by food or find any pleasure in food.
So the joy is gone, which affects your social interaction, which affects your relationships.
Everything.
It gets complicated.
Yeah. So that's the biggest one, is like this idea that it's the medication that somehow, like I had a client say to me one time, isn't it something about your metabolism? Doesn't it boost your metabolism? No. Not really. If anything, it's doing the opposite, right? Because it's so significantly decreasing your intake, your energy intake, right? And what we know about the human body is that over time, the less we take in, we also tend to move less, and your body picks up on that information and says, oh, we must be starving. We must be in a famine. We don't have enough food available.
So your metabolism ends up slowing down.
Right.
And then do they know if that is sustained? Does your metabolism stay slow when you stop the medication? So not only are you suffering during the process, but you get the payback of that slower metabolism. So when you go off, you then are battling
weight regain.
The regain.
Yeah, exactly. And research found 2/3 of individuals who have taken these medications at 1 year post discontinuing it, they have gained 2/3 of the amount of weight back that they originally lost. And we have a very similar statistic just with good old dieting,
right?
Right? We know that 2/3 of people who engage in intentional restrictive dieting are likely to gain more weight back than the weight they originally lost. And so when I talk to people about these drugs and people say, isn't this the fix? Like, this isn't diet culture. I mean, it's not a diet, right? In my opinion, it's deeper. The ultimate diet in a way, right? It's changing the biochemistry of the brain, your body,
it's the crux of diet culture. It's like the bullseye of what we have come to, that somebody may choose to suffer to be able to fit into a societal norm.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
So going to talking about societal pressures and stigma surrounding body size and weight impact individuals who are considering or using weight loss drugs. Mm-hmm. How much, is it all about societal pressure?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends on what part of society, I guess, right? So, we've got beauty norms, right? We've got our ableist, capitalistic, fat-phobic culture.
Tell me what ableist is. Not everybody knows what that actually means.
This idea that all bodies are supposed to be fully capable to do everything, and that, no, human bodies are flawed. It's part of owning and inhabiting a flesh suit, an earth suit, is bodies get injured, bodies are disabled, bodies have illness, they experience pain, discomfort. So, it's not invalidating someone's experience. Let's say someone's in a larger body or a fat body and they're having issues with mobility or flexibility. There's so much grief there. And this medication comes around and it's like, well, this could improve my quality of life. Maybe not.
What are you trading?
Right. And so when we think about ableist, right, it's so often a patient either going to their doctor or their family member saying, oh, I'm struggling, like I feel so much discomfort in my body. And rather than sitting in the suck and saying, what can we do in this moment to help improve your experience in your body, right? These small little steps that we can take. Rather than that, it's, oh, let's fix it. Oh, you're uncomfortable in your body? Let's fix it. Here's a medication to fix it.
So tell me, what are some of those small little steps that somebody can take?
Oh my gosh, so many. Well, this is my work, right? So I focused on actionable behaviors and our relationship to those, right? Our weight is not a behavior.
Right.
So,
I feel fat.
Yeah,
is not a feeling.
That's not a feeling,
It's
right?
not a
Are you
feeling.
feeling heavy? Are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling isolated? Are you feeling frustrated, right? Fat is not a feeling, it's a descriptive word, right? But unfortunately, we live in a world where fat means something else. It means something more. And so there's that term carries so much shame.
It's loaded.
And it's loaded with so much. And so when we're talking about, you asked the question around, social norms, part of it is, the media, TikTok, friends and family, a huge amount of it is coming from within our very weight-centric healthcare system as well, right? We have to remember, so right now, Novo Nordisk is projected to make $12.5 billion just in 2023. So yes, part of it is our culture and our mass media, but we also have to understand that there's also things happening behind the scenes, right? This is by far the most profitable drug class to ever be in pharmaceutical history, right? And you've got the big ones like Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, Sanofi, making drugs like this and making billions and billions of dollars, right? And then that trickles down to your primary care provider or your endocrinologist who is pushing these medications like no other. So yeah, it's coming, you're seeing the TikTok trends and you're seeing, the well-meaning family member that says, oh,
Get
you
this
should
magical
try this,
thing, try
right?
this.
And then they go to their doctor who they're supposed to trust and their doctor says, oh, you're experiencing discomfort in your body? Okay, here you go, right? And that's contributing to the shortage, right? So the FDA actually just wrote a letter to Eli Lilly recently, I think it was within the last couple of weeks, basically this call to action of like, we need to pump the brakes on this, right? These drugs are being given out like candy, and that there's a lot of risks and a lot of unknown risks and side effects that we haven't explored yet.
So it's feeding an endemic.
Yeah.
I'd like to now probe how you support clients who are considering using these weight loss medications. Would you, under any circumstances, recommend them, for somebody who is struggling with their body?
So I have recommended these medications before, specifically for blood glucose management, right?
So diabetes type 2.
Yes. Especially for someone who maybe really struggles with, daily medications, right? There's another drug class called SGLT2s that can be really great. They're cardiovascular protective, kidney protective, but it requires a daily pill, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. That's hard. It's really hard to take something every single day for
forever,
for decades. So for some individuals who are like, oh, I really don't want to take a medication every day, and I really, really want less burden of responsibility in terms of managing my diabetes, great, let's talk about GLP-1s. It's once weekly, there's no pills.
It's a spectrum. It's a continuum, which
exactly.
is where do you begin, where do you end?
Right. Versus someone who says to me, and this is nowadays a very normal session for me, is someone comes in and says, well, I don't have diabetes and I don't necessarily need this medication for blood glucose management, but I think I could really benefit from taking these medications, right? I feel like, I hear this a lot, I feel like I would just feel better. I would feel better in my body. I would have more body acceptance. I would have a better body image.
I'll fit into my clothes.
Fit into my clothes.
My friends will.
My mom will get off my back. She'll stop telling me to stop eating snacks. And so, if you had asked me this question even just 4 or 5 years ago, I probably would have had a very different response. I would have gotten up on my soapbox and said, well, you probably shouldn't be taking these medications. And now, with incorporating a lot more motivational interviewing and a lot more, like I said, sitting in the suck, a lot of
self-education. You're taking a step back and letting the client lead the conversation.
And saying, well, do I think it's okay for you to take these? Absolutely. I mean, totally. But let's just pump the brakes for a second. Let's talk about the pros and cons. Let's talk about what's coming up for you. What fears do you have? What concerns do you have? And what I find is that there's a massive amount of ambivalence that is happening around these drugs, right?
Pros and cons.
And so I notice it's kind of this continuum. So you've got this one side, and people meet with us because they're looking for body acceptance.
They want an answer.
Yes, and they're craving that peace with food, peace with their bodies, peace with movement, peace with everything that goes into owning and inhabiting a human body. So that's on one side, but then you've got just the culture that we live in and their doctors and their friends and their family. So what I've noticed is that, it's this continuum. The more that I pull on this one side and I say, well, you probably shouldn't be taking that, or, you should really just think about respecting your body. The more I pull, they pull back. Right? Well, but this is why I think I need to take it. I found myself a lot of the times talking my clients into taking it, right? Versus saying,
it's your choice.
What do you want to do? Why do you want to do this? I'm just interested, right? And when we have that freedom, that flexibility, that agency, I find that so often there's so many more questions of like, well, I think it could, but right? And that's the space that I hold for clients. Right?
And it's pretty powerful because when you take your opinion out of it, it helps the client or the patient to be able to really discover and connect what's their values, what's their purpose, what's their goals.
The values is big. That's big, yeah.
And that's where the power is. Mm-hmm. It's giving them back that ownership.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
So we've touched on intuitive eating. Intuitive eating and self-compassion are central themes in your coaching practice. Are these practices compatible or even complement the use of these weight loss medications?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot. I think there's a lot of differing opinions on this. Can somebody be pursuing intentional weight loss while simultaneously exploring intuitive eating? Like most things, it's nuanced, right? And again, it's the same approach where as a client coming in taking these medications, am I going to say, oh, we can't do this? Yeah. Right. No, I'm going to help the client understand a crucial part, and one of the main principles of intuitive eating is this whole idea of interoceptive awareness, this mind-body connection, especially when it comes to things like hunger and satiety. And so helping that client understand this medication is impacting that for you, and that you're going to have a very different experience trying to cultivate and excavate your relationship with food in your body, because you're having a direct impact that's disturbing this.
It's shutting something down, so it's hard to connect. It's hard to get through that wall.
Somewhat impossible. Yeah.
Or I was going to say, is it even possible?
Yeah. But at the same turn, there's 10 principles of intuitive eating, right?
You can practice bits and pieces. Intuitive eating is not all or nothing.
Exactly.
I know that I've had a couple of clients who are on these medications, and we focus on what they can do and what they want to do.
Exactly.
It's, that's the fact, is that it's principles. It's not, you're not on or off. No. You are always, as long as your mindset is in the heart of what that goal is.
Totally. Intent. Yeah.
You are practicing parts of intuitive eating.
100%.
And
100%.
it is not an all or nothing game.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
What advice do you give to individuals who are contemplating the use of weight loss drugs but are also interested in adopting that non-diet, self-compassionate approach to health and well-being? Like, how do you, we touched on it.
Yeah.
How do you have that conversation?
It's a depends on the client. I would say one of the things that can be really useful is first of all, decreasing any urgency.
It's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. We have time. We can play around, we can experiment. Like, nothing has to be decided right now. I find so often clients come in,
they want the fix today.
I have to have this, I got to get on track. This whole idea of I've fallen off track and I need to get back on track.
Or somebody else has already started, I need to do it.
Right. My doctor's really, been on me for months now to do this drug, right? So it's decreasing the urgency and saying, okay.
And we're talking about people who are not diabetic. We're talking about choice for weight loss.
Totally, exactly, yeah. And also, even people with diabetes, right? I find that so often, there's a reason why some individuals will have significantly elevated A1Cs because they were so overwhelmed with their healthcare. Yeah, I mean, the amount of pressure and the shame and all of that came with maybe having higher blood sugars, disengaging with their healthcare team. So even someone coming in with diabetes, it's, hey, you know what? We got time.
So you touched on something that's really important. People don't understand the impact of stress on their bodies and their A1C levels.
Not at all.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh my God. It's the first thing, when I meet with somebody with diabetes, I don't spend the first session talking about any food whatsoever. There's no food talk. It's, you know what? I wonder if we could explore something that I think might be useful to you in understanding your glucose levels and how your body responds to things. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the client is like, stress? What do you mean? Well, I'm not stressed. Okay,
really?
Let's define stress,
live in this world?
right? Like, let's define stress, right? It has a huge impact on blood glucose levels, specifically something called gluconeogenesis, which is happening from the liver, right? Your liver picks up on, your liver is just like the real MVP of the body, right? It picks up on all these subtle cues and, detoxifies the body. It has all these critical roles. And with stress, you've got an increase in a hormone called cortisol, right? And so cortisol's job is to tell the liver, oh my God, there's a threat in our external environment. There's a grizzly bear. There's something compromising our survival. The liver then releases an enormous amount of glucose, which was stored as glycogen. So you've got this huge uptick in blood sugar, right, as a result of stress. And it can happen in acute. It can happen right away. You slam on your brakes in the traffic and your blood sugar spikes. It can happen like that. Or this just chronic, debilitating hyperglycemia, that no matter the amount of healthy eating, movement, sleep, folks will come in, what is going on? Why can't I get my blood sugars down? First question I ask is, tell me a little bit. Do you feel comfortable telling me a little bit about stress and how you manage and relate to your stress? Most people have no idea how to answer that question. What do you mean? Well, I try not to be stressed. No, you're stressed. How do you manage it? It's not about trying not to be. We're all stressed.
Right.
What strategies? What strategies do you have?
What tools do you have in your toolbox?
Totally. So yes, and that's at the root of self-care, right? It's joyful movement, right? So it's healing our relationship with this punitive type of miserable movement, right. Exercise.
Work out because you want to get to be X versus for the joy of what you're actually doing.
The joy / also just for the biochemical benefits. I find sometimes if we shift the focus inward when we're moving our bodies and thinking about your skeletal muscles soaking up glucose and your digestive system getting all this extra blood, it shifts things, right? Because now I'm not thinking about toning a certain part of my body, and I'm thinking about these powerful biochemical shifts that are starting to happen.
And that's super powerful, because when you think about that, your muscle is just so small in compared to all of the other internal benefits that you are getting emotionally, mentally, physically.
Totally. And that's a perfect example. That's a tool that we could put in the stress management tool belt. I talk a lot about breathing, various somatic exercises, meditation, good sleep, hydration. And when it comes to food, we talk about, are you eating enough? Are you eating regularly, consistently? Are your meals and snacks comprised of different macronutrients? Are you getting carbs, proteins, fats, some sources of fiber? I just find that that's just not typically what we're hearing when it comes to nutrition.
Not at all. Yeah. And it's so interesting, because I work with a lot of clients and, the nighttime snacking thing comes in. And when we start to really unpack it, they're not eating during the day. And they're just like, I don't understand. I'm so out of control. I've been so good all day. And, tell me, oh, well, I had a couple blueberries for breakfast.
Right.
And then I had a salad
had
for
a protein
lunch.
bar. Yeah.
And, and I just, I don't think I need to be eating that late, but I can't control it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Giving ourselves permission to eat is so hard.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. We just talked about all the social systems that make it impossible to feel like we have the confidence and the self-efficacy to feed ourselves, especially in social settings, especially.
So I have a final hypothetical question. If weight loss drugs were completely safe, affordable, and accessible with no side effects, is this really the answer?
I thought about this question. I was like, how do I want to answer this? And essentially what you're asking is if we had a magic pill.
Correct.
Right? And I say to my clients a lot, anytime we're sitting in the suck or we're experiencing body grief, it's like, oh my gosh, you have no idea how bad I want to give you a magic pill. If I had it, oh my gosh, I would just give it to you. Not because it would make you a better person or it would make you a happier person or, but because I understand the social spheres and the systems that we live in, right? So if I had this magic pill for you, I would love to be able to decrease the discomfort and the shame that you experience navigating this world, right? We don't have it.
We don't have it.
This isn't it.
And it still goes to the fact that people still have an opinion about our bodies. Yeah. And that we're looking to fix something that's actually not wrong with our bodies.
Right. And that by, one of my favorite, Brie Campos, she's Body Image with B, she talks about, we can't fix body image by fixing our body. Right? And that's essentially what this conversation is about, right? Like if we had this magic pill, it's like I would give it to my clients just because out of compassion of like, look at this shitty world that we live in, Right. But that no, it's not going to fix everything.
No,
it's not going to.
It's the Band-Aid, and it's just covering it up doesn't make it go away.
Exactly.
Before you tell us about this week's practice, are there any other words of wisdom you would like to share?
This is so hard, Don't. It's not right or wrong. It's not black or white. This all lives in the gray area. And so if you're someone who's contemplating or feeling like you're on the fence or that ambivalence we were talking about, I would encourage you to meet with somebody, talk about it, whether it be a dietitian or preferably HAES aligned, a Health at Every Size aligned provider who can hold space for these conversations, because this is really heavy, and you shouldn't have to feel like you have to make this kind of decision by yourself.
And you just hit on something really important. Know who you are talking to, so that you don't go in talking to somebody who's going to pull you to the other side. That's going to give you the space and grace to unpack and connect with your thoughts and your feelings, as challenging as it's going to be.
Yeah, preferably someone who doesn't have a financial interest
and that's
in prescribing these meds
That
to
is
you,
exactly what we're talking about. So please share your practice that you would like to have this week.
So, this is a good segue because we were just talking a little bit about body image. So although this isn't specifically have anything to do with these medications, I do find that, when I am sitting with clients navigating this social system that we're in and the pressures of the thin ideal, this whole idea that we are more than a body can be like the most peaceful reminder.
Lexi
Kite, right? Lexi and Lindsay. Our body is not an ornament. It is an instrument. And that, this idea that our earth suit is what allows us to paint the masterpiece of our life. Our body is not the masterpiece of our life. It's going to wither away. It's going to get sick, injured, disabled. Navigating the world in an earth suit is really hard. But it's yours, and it's gotten you to this point, and it's flawed, but there are small, actionable things that we can do that can care for it and make living in it a little bit easier and a little bit less distressing. You are more than a body, and your body is, in fact, the least interesting thing about you.
We are all imperfectly perfect. And the book that you are talking about or referring to is More Than a Body by Lexi and Lindsay Kite. So thank you so much for being my guest today. And today we have learned about the impact that today's diet drugs are having on our physical and mental health and tools to help educate. Again, any information that we shared today is for information only, and any medical choices that you make must be supported through you and your personal medical team. If you're looking to continue the conversations, please visit me for my monthly office hours and my monthly conversations, which is about going deeper and you being part of this conversation. You can learn more on my website on when those dates are happening. And I look forward to seeing you next time for Getting Healthy Without Rules.